I want to welcome you, my very good friend, Kulebanwo, and I equally want to welcome all our guests from all around the world for joining in this edition of Leadership Blueprint podcast. Um, I don't have any doubt that this podcast has been a life game changer for many people. I've had feedback from people, and I could see the impact that the podcast is really making out there. And I sincerely want to thank you, my friend, for doing this with me. It's because of our passion for our continent, for our nation, for our world, that we are doing this. We are not doing this for monetary gain. We are not doing it for because we want to be known or we want to be famous. We are doing this because we are desirous of a transformed African society. And I believe that in our own lifetime, we will see that transformation manifest in the continent of Africa. So I want to welcome you once again, Kunle. It's good to see you. Maybe.
Thank you very much, Ego. It's always a pleasure, as you said, where the intention is right.
Yeah.
The goal is very simple. We want to see transformation, and we believe that we can be part of that transformation, as is other people who also believe that transformation is exactly what we need. So thank you. It's a privilege to do this with you, and I'm looking forward to greater impact as we progress.
Yeah, thank you so much. Today, we want to talk about something that is very, very fundamental. There is something that philosopher calls the teleological, well, they call it teleological argument for the existence and the beginning of origin of life, So there is what we call the teleological argument, that is the reason and the purpose for the existence of life, of our being, and all that. And so we want to talk about purpose. And in this regard, we want to talk about what it means to lead with purpose. And so to start, we need to kind of lay the background of the conversation, because we're going to weave purpose into leadership. And before we can do that, we need to lay the background for the concept that is called purpose. Now, for me, I don't know what you're going to come up with. When we talk about purpose, I would love to say that purpose is the reason for which something is done. For example, what is the purpose of this Leadership Blueprint podcast? It's so simple. The purpose for this Leadership Blueprint podcast is to provide a framework, a blueprint for the desired transformation that we want to see in Africa. That is all that we are doing through this podcast. It's not a political podcast. It's not a business-minded podcast. It's a podcast that is founded on the tenet of providing a blueprint for the social re-engineering that we all crave for. I know we all crave for this in the continent of Africa. So purpose in our own context is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. I know perhaps you will have some other definition that you might want our viewers to learn about. So what do you think purpose is?
I'm in total agreement with you. Purpose is evidently the reason of something for something, but it's also the motivation for
Mm,
something.
mm,
What motivates
mm,
the existence
mm,
of a thing,
mm,
whether it is something in the natural world
mm,
or ventures
mm,
or any endeavor or
mm,
any initiative? What is the motivation? Or simply put, what's the motive?
mm,
Or in other words, we are answering the questions: why are you doing this?
mm,
And why is it important? And I believe that purpose always resides in the heart of the creator of a thing, in the heart of the manufacturer, the creator, the originator, because you must be motivated by something in order to go on to bring it to light or to attempt to create it. So that in addition to the reason, it's also the motivation, and it's also the, I would call it, the desired outcome. In other words, what is the end
mm,
that is necessitating the beginning? I like it when the end or a picture of the end is clearly defined,
mm.
because then that tells you what you then need to use as input and how and what kind of process that will help achieve that desired end. So, yes, the reason, the motivation, the desired end.
Thank you so much. Now, the topic for this Leadership Blueprint podcast is, what does it mean to lead with purpose? Now, I want us to be able to connect it to our context as Africans. You don't need any prophet, you don't need any prophecy, you don't need some unusual experience to know that Africa as a society is a chaotic society as we speak today. And because there is chaos in the society, then to my own mind, it calls for it calls for people like you and me to rise up in order to put the chaos into their proper order. It calls for you and I and every other people out there to come up with some blueprints and be able to lead with a purpose in the midst of the chaos. And I think that is the reason why I believe that this podcast is very, very important, because we are talking about leading with purpose, particularly in a chaotic society like we have in the African society today, which means there are certain actions, there are certain decisions, there are certain behaviors we need to galvanize together and then be able to chart a clear and meaningful direction that will transcend the disorder that we have in the society. Now, I'm sure, when we were in secondary school, we did uh, physics as one of our course subjects. I was a science student before I decided to run away because, because mathematics was not treating me well. We studied a principle, I'm sure you will remember. We studied a principle in physics that is called entropy. And the principle of entropy simply says that, or states that, everything naturally is in a state of chaos and disorder until you begin to apply order and begin to provide clarity to it. So I just want you to talk a little bit about how we can, through leading with purpose, bring clarity and intentionality into our context in African society as we have it today, to be able to lead a generation into the promised land that we've all been aspiring towards. Can you talk a little bit about
Thank
that?
you, my friend. And I'll begin, and I'm sure you would then take it and extend that thought even further. But let's put it this way. If we decided that we wanted certain outcomes, I'm going to use a very simple example so that anyone can follow. If I wanted to bake a cake,
Mm,
I must have a picture of the kind of cake I wanted to bake
mm,
in mind before I even begin at all. That picture is the concept of my end. Where am I going with this? Now, if my cake is going to be a chocolate cake, and I'm hoping people are not going to get hungry. Um, that's the picture in my mind. I have to get the materials, flour,
mm,
the chocolate, the other ingredients. Now, I'm not just getting ingredients haphazardly. Something else is dictating to me what I need to get because of the outcome I'm anticipating or I'm envisaging.
mm,
Secondly, because of what I want to create,
mm,
my process will also become implied, i.e., these are the things you need to do in order to have a successfully baked chocolate cake.
mm,
Why am I using this analogy? In very simple terms, to lead with purpose implies that we're beginning or we are leading with an end, with some end in mind.
mm, mm,
Some end. I like the way Stephen Covey put
mm,
it in its Seven Habits
mm,
uh, book. And it says, look, the first thing is begin with the end in mind. Because if there's no clear definition of an end,
mm,
then the journey is simply haphazard. Anything goes. Then the law of entropy
mm.
normally charts its course
Take
in that
over.
everything tends towards disorder
Yeah,
unless someone intentionally set order back into the environment.
yeah.
So if we say, let me use some very good examples so that this can become real and not theoretical. Let's say we determine that the Africa as a in fact, let's not make it too big. Let's say Nigeria,
Mm,
or maybe let's say Lagos.
mm,
We determine that Lagos will produce a sizable amount of the best IT talents
mm,
to take on the IT challenges in the world, anywhere in the world. Now, because of that end game, we'll begin to design a curriculum that will say what are the relevant, what's the direction IT is going, so that we can train our youth population intentionally in that area. We will adjust whatever needs to be adjusted, including the budget, including how we recruit them, the criteria for recruitment, all because we already have something defined. And we have a plan that, okay, in the next 3 years or 5 years, we must begin to have this materializing.
mm,
But then we would have milestone to say, are we on track? Because of that end. That end guides every step of the way. So, because leading is a very active, actionable
mm,
endeavor, every action that goes into achieving the end that we're envisaging can be measured, can be determined, can be prescriptive even. So that if we're not heading in the right direction, we will know, wait a minute, what we're doing right now, what we're imputing, and how we're addressing things is not likely to give us the outcome that we need. So, my point here is because we have a reason, because we have an end that is defined, because we have a motivation, and our motivation could be that, listen, if we don't do this, we will be left behind and we will not be able um, to influence the technological landscape, or we will not be able to generate the kind of GDP that we need. Something must motivate, or things that there must be clearly defined motivations for that outcome. All of that go into what we then need to do in order to arrive at the end that we already foreseen, because there's a clear purpose, there's a clear intention in the mind. The same thing goes for any other endeavor. Like if we want a healthy society, or we want to produce the best, we want uh, let's say Lagos or Nigeria to be the health mecca of the world,
Mm.
and that end drives everything else
No,
that.
nothing. Mm.
If you don't have that, what
Mm.
what do you have? You just keep on people. You just send people to university. They go and study whatever, and they come out. They say, "Well, I have no job." Or they say, you know what? I've studied now. I've already achieved what my parents pressured me to
What
study.
are you to do?
Exactly. Now let me go and find something else to do. So you find somebody who poured his energy into studying, uh,
Medicine, for example.
say medicine. By the time he finishes, he says, "No, I don't like to be a doctor." So then what? How would you justify the investment of the time, of the money, of the energy that sometimes you hardly can recover from? How would you justify that when the outcome does not align with the end goal? So, but then if there was no predetermined end in the first instance, then everything is just a bunch of chaos. You just heading somewhere, literally like a chicken without a head. So this is why I'm saying leading with purpose has to have some of these components in order to arrive at a predetermined outcome.
Thank you very much. Now, if I clearly understand what you're saying, I'm trying to distill everything you're saying into what our viewers can easily understand, and which means that the disorderliness, the disorganization, or the dysfunctionality that we have in our society today is because those who parade themselves as leaders at the inception of their leadership do not possess that end in view.
No. So what tends to happen? Somebody comes along and say, "I'll build roads. I will.
I'll build stadium.
I'll do build stadium." Those are meaningless.
Yeah,
They are absolutely meaningless because, so okay, build stadium, build road. Why?
yeah.
If the why question is not answered, and it's not answered genuinely,
Mm.
what you're going to have is people then know they don't know what to do with resources, and they
Yeah, so
think,
they just build some
let's
one relevant projects
yes,
just to
just
showcase
go
that
on.
they're doing something.
Exactly, they go on elephant good. I mean, they embark on elephant project or white goose chase,
Yeah.
and what you have is a waste, dissipation of energy, of resources, and most of the times people just say, you know what, let's just put this money in our pocket and walk
Exactly.
away.
Exactly. Mm.
So, in your view, what? So, I think I know you definitely want to elaborate on it.
Yeah.
So, what's your perspective on this matter?
Well, just like you have said, now if we take let's begin with a garden, for example. If you have a garden, you have two choices in that garden. Is either you decide how the garden is going to look like, or you decide by doing something that moves you in the direction of how that garden is going to look like. Or you decide to do nothing about the garden and just allow nature to take its course. And
Mm.
of course, when you have that kind of attitude and disposition, you know what the result is going to be. What you will have in a couple of weeks or months is that you are going to have the entire garden overgrown with weeds. And that is exactly what leading with purpose is. If you don't chart a clear direction, if you are not intentional about what you are doing as a leader, if you are not doing what you are doing with an end in view, all you're going to have in your garden is a garden that is overgrown with weeds. Now, also, if you have a building, an house, and let's say the house was already built, is a good house,
Mm.
but you didn't do any other thing in that house. Nobody is living in the house. Nobody is sweeping anywhere. Nobody is cleaning anywhere. Believe me honestly, in about 5 years, in fact, 5 years is too much. This is a new house that was newly built, but nothing has been done in that house. Nobody is sleeping in the house. Nobody is cleaning anything in the house. In 5 years' time, you will have more repairs done in that house than, than if people had been living in that house, intentionally putting things in order in that house. Within those 5 years, you will spend more money putting that house in a better shape in 5 years' time if nothing is done in the house at the start at the beginning of when people are supposed to be living in the house. And
Yeah,
this is what applies to our natural situations and circumstances.
100%.
If we are not deliberate, if we are not intentional, if we are not focusing and purposeful in what we are doing, we are not going to achieve the desired result that we want. And this is the reason why we are where we are in Africa today.
Do you agree with me that part of the, so if you like, the lack of this purposeful leadership is also why resources
Have,
otherwise
have vanished.
termed as curses? So somebody will say,
Yeah.
oh,
Oil
well,
is a cause in
oil is a
Nigeria,
curse, right?
or
Oil
gold
is
is
not
a
a
cause
curse.
in Ghana.
I mean, think about it. There are nations around the world that have oil
Yeah,
and done tremendous things.
massive development with it.
Example, the
Right?
Emirates,
Yeah,
of course,
Saudi
the
Arabia.
Arabia, United
Uh-huh.
States,
Yeah,
uh, United Kingdom,
yeah,
Netherlands. I
yeah,
mean, some of those countries
yeah,
in the Nordics.
yeah,
It's all down to division. See,
yeah.
the
Vision.
issue is not lack of resources. As a matter of fact, there are nations that don't even have as much or as many resources, physical
Like
earth resources.
Japan lacks many natural resources that many countries have, but they are one of the most developed countries in the world. Why? Because they have vision, they have purpose.
Let me define this way, Shagun. The greatest gift that God gave man
Mm,
is image,
mm.
i.e., intellectual capacity. Here,
Think to create things.
capacity to see beyond your eyes,
Mm,
the capacity to build concept, the capacity to create solution concept, the capacity to bring naturally unrelated things together and turn them into something meaningful.
mm.
So that's why if I go biblical, what God told Adam was, you are in my image. That is, you have my intellectual capacity, you have my mental capacity. With that, I don't need to give you a chair. I just need to give you trees. Because when you look at trees, you can see what is hidden in a tree and then bring furniture out of it. I don't need to give you gold chains. I just need to tell you there is gold ore there. You will devise a means to extract it
mm,
and then transform it in order to build the jewelries and everything else. So the greatest need, the greatest endowment that every human has, every all of the 8 billion plus people in the world have, and
mm,
we have this in common,
mm,
is intellectual capacity, intellect.
mm.
So, so the real endowment is not the earth resources.
Yeah,
It's not because people who can use this can take the earth resource from those who don't know what to do with it.
exactly. And that's what the West are doing to Africa.
Yeah, because if you
They
don't,
have the intellectual
listen,
capacity, and then they just keep plundering the society.
I'll put it this way, and this may sound a little mean. The resource of the earth is for all of the people on the earth.
Mm,
So if you sit on resource and don't know what to do with it,
mm.
and there's somebody else who is
Values the
not there
resource.
but knows what to do with it,
Yeah,
what will happen is conditions will be created to displace those who don't know what to do with it in
yeah,
order to accommodate those who know what to do with it.
yeah.
Now you can say, "Oh, this is not good. This is not fair," but but the earth, the earth abhors the that irresponsible use of resources. So the earth itself will say, well, I don't, maybe it's not fair, but I would allow this to happen. That is why leading with purpose is an essential, it's a necessity. As a matter of fact, it's a survival requirement.
So, Kunle, if I may want to, we still need to lay the foundation very properly so that people will know how important uh, the discovery of purpose is to whatever any man wants to do in life. Now, this purpose that we are talking about, is it is it bestowed? Is it given? How do we discover it? What
Mm,
are the steps that we need to take to arrive at a position and be able to say, this is my purpose in life?
mm. Shagun, you have asked a very huge question that we can't answer in one sitting. It's impossible. And I will probably indicate why. And I know you have a lot of resources in this area as well. But let's think about it. I think that there are many dimensions to the subject of purpose.
Mm,
One dimension is, in fact, spiritual,
mm,
i.e., you say God has a purpose for earth,
yeah.
for everything that is on earth.
Mm,
But then there is another dynamics of purpose, which is imbued in an individual, and it's as if God Himself requires every individual to discover that both in connection to Him and within themselves and in relation to the environment. I'll explain. What do you say about someone who said, oh, maybe like a university? Let's pick one of the universities, let's say Oxford or Harvard. That school some time ago did not exist.
yeah.
Maybe in 1500s, that school was not there.
Yeah.
At some point, someone saw the picture of an institution of learning
Yeah.
that will literally change the face of management, the
Yeah.
face of enterprise, of commerce, and law, and most things in the world.
Mm,
And that person, or those persons, perhaps, decided that this is possible, or this was possible. and their pursuit gave it credence.
mm,
Hence, you have something that was just a figment of imagination,
mm,
but then became something tangible that has very, very clear, touchable, livable impact in the world of human beings. I am introducing these dynamics because it's very easy for someone to say, well, unless God shows me my purpose, I'll just be waiting.
mm,
But there are people that you couldn't say they have very, I mean, clear relationship with God, even though God is in everyone. See, this is the other side of it. God works in everyone. So maybe I can say that fundamentally, the discovery of purpose is contingent on the relationship of an individual with his creator.
mm,
But then there's another aspect, which is that it is a it is also tied to the discovery of
mm,
oneself, which
mm,
is I am beginning to see why I am, and
mm,
I'm answering the why question.
mm.
In fact, in almost any case, no matter how much you shape, whether you look at it from a religious lens or from another
Yeah.
lens, it
Mm,
is always tied to answering the why question.
yeah. The why
And
question.
another thing that purpose is tied to is always, almost always with a sense of dissatisfaction
Mm,
that this is not okay.
yeah.
These things can be different
Mm,
because the person that is the someone that is discovering purpose may not be religious. In fact, maybe an atheist, maybe just about it. As long as a human being,
yeah.
you must be answering that why question. If you think about the people that shaped the Emiratis,
Mm,
the Dubai, the UAE, these were people that just thought we're in a desert. We look disadvantaged.
mm,
And in fact, part of the story that I read was that was more like a village of fishermen.
mm,
But someone saw something else. And now you see people channeling the sea literally into a desert area.
mm.
Somebody saw that. Somebody was saying the status quo cannot persist.
I even learned that there is a city that is being built in Qatar currently that has open air condition.
In other words,
Open air condition.
that's why I said earlier on that the greatest investment that God has given to every man is intellect here. The ability to see what does not yet, no,
Exist.
no. So I wanted to say that, but let me correct myself.
Okay.
The ability to see what is yet invisible but exists.
Mm. What exists. That is yet to be, but exists.
Yes.
Mm.
Honestly, everything exists,
Yeah.
but you just may not see it.
Yeah.
And for people who are observing what's going on around the world, you will see that there are things that are being brought to life that you would have thought, no, it's impossible. The word impossible, it just doesn't is really, I think it just indicates your level of thinking.
Mm.
Everything is possible.
Mm.
The issue is, are you willing to pursue it? So, but not to digress too much. When we talk about discovering purpose, yes, I would say fundamentally, and I encourage a relationship with the Creator, God. But as part of that, an introspection
Mm.
and asking,
That's
why am
that's
I,
very key.
yes, why am I here? What is the reason for me?
Mm.
A third angle is the willingness to challenge the status quo and say, why must it be this way?
Right. Mm.
I think, among other things, those are important. Because if you don't ask that kind of question, that challenge,
Mm.
if you don't, and there's no willingness to
Mm.
respond to that challenge,
Mm.
chances are
Mm.
time will pass, whatever will be, will be. And most likely, what will be is a worse condition.
Yeah,
I know you have a lot to add to that, Shegun, please. Um,
definitely. Just like you said, I remember during my teenage years, of course, we went to the same secondary school together. Even at that age, uh, maybe from, I would say, probably maybe from when I was in GSS2, 3, 4, SS1, SS2, SS3, I was really confronted with this question: why am I here? What is my purpose? What have I been born to fulfill? Of course, those answers didn't come instantly, and it would be very foolish of anybody to believe that when you ask those kind of questions, you're going to have these instant answers. And I also want to say, so that our viewer can learn, that even when you find the answer, that doesn't mean that is the end of the answer. The answer
Progressive.
will still keep coming. You will still keep discovering more and more about yourself as times goes on. So in a sense, your purpose is not a destination, as it were, that you are going. It's a journey, is an uncovering of several milestones that you will reach and encounter during your lifetime. So discovery of purpose, I would say, is a journey to personal self-discovery. And it involves you identifying what truly matters to you. I'm not talking about what matters to your father or your mother or any of your siblings. What is it that is in sync with your personality, that is in sync with the way you see the world, that is in sync with the way you do things around you? These are the questions. These are some of the discoveries that we need to make concerning ourselves. Now, in our personal leadership journey, the leadership program, that curriculum that we've put together for people to go through, we have about 5 modules of that leadership curriculum, with about four topics in each module. In one of our very first module, we have what we call vocational leadership. And what are we talking about? What are we talking about in vocational leadership? We are simply talking about you discovering your innate ability, the innate gifting that you have been given by God. For example, the intention of that vocational leadership is to make you happy. And to make you happy in what sense? That is, what are you what do you hate? That is the word age. I'm taking the acronym of the word happy now. What do you hate to see around you? Now, the things you don't like to see around you, they are not just there for you to keep getting angry or for you to keep hating them. They are there, they are things pointing you in the direction of what you have been created to resolve. Now that is for age. What do you hate to see? Now, hey, what are you angry about? What you are angry about is not just for you to keep venting your anger on the social media and begin to talk about how the government are not performing their responsibility. Those things you are angry about are things that your creator has programmed around you for you to resolve in your lifetime. Now, what do you hate to see? What are you angry about? Then what are you passionate about? What you are passionate about. When you are passionate about something, believe me honestly, there is nothing anybody can do about it. You are just passionate about it. And there is nobody that can take that passion away from you. Your passion is simply a signal to what you have been called to do. Then what is your purpose? Why am I born? Why was I born in a country like Nigeria? Why was I born into a family of this nature? You need to begin to uncover those why things. Why? We need to question ourselves and ask why. In the process of finding out why, the reason for those things, that is when the answers will keep coming. And of course, the letter Y, rather than bringing it from the first word, I brought it from the last letter from the word play. What do you love to play with? What you love to play with is also a signal to what you have been called to pursue. And that is the basic principle of our vocational leadership. And of course, vocation is your calling, is what you have been called to do. And that is what I believe. That is what I believe is what we need to do to discover our purpose. And do you know, I just recently discovered that this vocational leadership principle that I just shared now, I just found out that in Japan, they have a similar concept. I wasn't aware of this until recently. I just recently discovered that Japan has a concept that is called the Ikigai concept. And what does Ikigai concept, what's it talking about? Ikigai concept is trying to offer you a structured approach to finding your purpose by intersecting what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. The intersection of these four things that I've mentioned are what points you to your purpose in life, and which is very, very in line with the concept of the vocational leadership, which we have been teaching people for over 2 years now, which perfectly falls in line with the same principle of Ikigai in Japan.
And to be fair, so Shegun, so you know, there is no way you will cut it.
Yeah,
Most interventions that would help people to discover their personal growth
yeah,
and the question of purpose will be answering similar questions. I mean,
exactly.
I've seen it in so many curriculum, but it is what we do about those
Yeah,
things that matter. I always say that we must become documenters of ourselves. In
mm,
other words, we go to school and we take note about everything, right? But we don't do any study in ourselves. So you
exactly.
learn about accounting, you learn about medicine, you learn about pharmacy, but there is no study on yourself, you as a subject.
Mm,
So to my encouragement to all our listeners is this. It's time to do self-study.
that's
A,
right.
a proper self-study, like we need self-education. We are usually educated out of ourselves about other things. So we know how to handle somebody's money,
Mm,
but we don't know how to handle your own money. These are all meant to take us, as it were, into some sense of insignificance, if you like. I would
mm,
say that it's important that we begin to, when you answer those questions that Shagun just said, about happy or the various other interventions, write them down. Because as you begin to write them down, and by the time and you keep asking the questions, there will be a natural refinement of the answers you're discovering. Shagun, I know you want to say something.
yeah. Do you know that between 1996 and 2002, I had an open mind. What do I mean by an open mind? I had an open mind in the sense that everything I was asking myself during those times, all the things that were coming to me as a feedback from the questions I was asking myself, I was documenting them. And for about 6 years, I was documenting what I believe are the central pinnacle of what I am doing today. Not that I am doing them word for word now. Of course, they have been refined over time, but the main idea is that the main principle still remains. The fundamental idea of those things that I got during those self-revealing questions that I was asking myself, they are still there today. And so nobody should believe that they cannot do something about their situation. Nobody should believe that they cannot do something about their life. All they just need to do is to have an open mind, ask themselves questions, and like the philosophers, if you want to talk about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, even Paul the Apostle, he was a philosopher in his own right too, a religious philosopher, if you would like to say. Paul the Apostle will say to you, examine yourself. Know you not yourself? So we must all come to the point when we have to self-examine ourselves and know the true state of ourselves. It is in knowing all this that we'll be able to know what we have been called to do in life. And when we get to that point, when we know what we have been called to do in life, then we can then lead with purpose, with intentionality, with clarity, and begin to forge ahead. And of course, begin to take people along as we journey. I know we've dealt much about this, but I just want you to talk about how a leader can proceed with the notion of clarity of vision. How can a leader proceed, from all this background work that we have laid? How then can a leader proceed with the notion of clarity of vision?
Another fundamental question, Shegun, and I'll put it this way. You must accept that your purpose is your responsibility.
It is. It is. No, it's nobody's responsibility. It is yours. I
What
agree.
what I mean is this, and of course, I know I'm saying this to all of our audience, and I'm sure some of our audience, some of them believe it, but you must, as an individual, I must accept that my purpose is my responsibility, is the debt I owe.
To yourself and your society.
Exactly. Myself and my generation.
Mm.
What does that really mean? It means then that once I begin to say this, the process of purpose is very interesting. When you fundamentally have that awareness of what you have been born to do, what this is an obligation. Invariably, it begins to show in pictures. Your mind begins to see the concept of it. Sometimes, I don't know if this has happened to you many times. I remember a time when I'll sit down in a class at work, and I'll be on the computer doing stuff, but my mind has gone away. I've left that room physically. I'll be picturing, imagining what I could be doing. It may be that you are in a classroom or you're on the bed, but you're imagining.
For example, don't mind me that I have to cut you there.
Please
For
jump in.
example, I remember when we were undergraduates. I know you were jokingly, you will talk about yourself. I'm going to be David Joe International in the future. I am
Yes,
not surprised today because David Joe International
it's
is,
a reality.
is a reality today.
And I tell you, Shagun,
It was an idea that you conceived almost 30 years, if not over 30 years ago.
let me tell you exactly how that happened. When I was between 16 17, I decided that I would move my bed from my bed to the library in my dad's house. So I was sleeping with books. And it was whilst I was imagining and I was asking that question, what exactly do I need to do? Who am I? It was then I began to see that my life, in a way, mirrors the lives of two characters in the Bible,
Yeah.
David and Joseph.
Mm.
And literally, honestly, physically, in some aspect, it actually does.
Yeah.
And at the same time, around that time, I was also working in a poultry house.
Yeah.
So I was imagining myself like David, who was with the sheep.
Yeah.
I was imagining myself like Joseph, who was away from the family. So, and I knew these people, they affected their generations very significantly. So I
Yeah.
was seeing myself in their picture. I did not like my circumstance because,
Yeah.
well, around that time, most of my classmates were already going to university. Somehow I was stuck where I was. So I was not happy, but I was seeing what was possible.
Yeah.
So when I go to the poultry house and I'm putting my hands on the chicken, I'm thinking like a David. I'm thinking, right, just like the David was looking after the sheep, I'll look after you too. And the point here is you must make your what you see your responsibility. There must be a commitment to what you see that this, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm committed to this.
Yeah. You're right.
That
Absolutely.
commitment will drive some fundamental action. It will generate passion inside of you. It will generate some kind of discipline inside of you. It will generate certain things. Like
Mm.
around that time was when I decided that the word boredom will never feature in my diary anymore.
Mm.
It was leading me to read books. It was leading me to make friends who are older than me. As a matter of fact, at that time, most of my friends about that age were 8 or 10 years or 12 years older than me. I would sit down with them, we'll be chatting, we'll be discussing various things that you think are serious that I could not deal with my age mates because I just felt like they were too playful. They all they wanted to do was to play football, but I was seeing more than that. And this thing was fueling something in me. I was beginning to draw pictures. I'll be drawing things. I took calendars from old calendars. I started to draw on them. I pasted them around the house so that everywhere I'm going, I'm seeing things that remind me of what was happening in my head. So by the time I came to university, when we were again together in university, the matter of David Joe International, you did not need to convince me about it. I already knew that was going to happen. I was fully persuaded.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of time. As a matter of fact, it became my nickname. Initially, everybody was calling him David Joe, because I felt like this has to be reinforced.
Yeah. And people assisted you in a way to, kind of make the name get
Yes,
stuck with you.
because if you refuse to talk about your vision, your purpose, then people have nothing to criticize.
Yeah.
They also have nothing to support.
Yeah.
I remember telling one of my pastors there, I said, I remember when we were getting baptized, and I said, I want to change my name to David Joe. He just laughed. But that was not enough to discourage me. I knew David Joe was something to me. He was saying David. No, I said, no, not David, David Joe. In fact, I changed my signature to David Joe. In spite of our challenging background at that time,
Yeah.
it was not stopping what I was saying. I saw myself, I believe that I started to see certain gifting in me. My gift started to make sense that
Mm.
I would be transmitting ideas
Mm.
into minds.
Mm.
So when I was asked to teach, it just became one of those exciting times for me to just Okay. I felt like I was, you are living the future in the present.
mm,
What am I saying with all of this? When you begin to see your purpose, certain things will start to happen to you. You begin to have what they call vision. You must again document it.
exactly.
This why you document it is because you're going to have various iterations, versions of it. But if you never wrote the first version, you will not be able to write the second version. You
Vice
will not
versa.
write the third version.
Yeah.
And what you write down begins to govern your life. Suddenly you find out that you cannot make the decision that people around you are making.
Yeah.
So to young people around me, is it
Mm,
we did a workshop on vision 2 months ago. No, sorry, in the first quarter of the year. And this is for people between ages of 12 and 18, 19. And I was saying, so, I was telling them the first thing you have to do is to write down the things that come to your mind.
that
Write it.
I cannot agree less with you.
If you do not write it down, there is nothing to refer to. Now, don't use your brain
Memory.
memory.
So you will
No,
commit
no,
it to memory. Put
no.
it down.
Write it down. Take a pen and paper. Write
Like
it down.
like my Bulldog would say in those days, the faintest pencil is sharper than the sharpest brain.
Sharpest memory.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trap it, so writing something down is
Yeah.
committing yourself to the future. Is committing yourself to what you see.
Mm,
It's an action of commitment.
mm, mm.
Don't forget, most of the time in the Bible, God will say, "What you see,
Write
right.
it down. Mm.
What you
About
see, right.
right division, make it plain on
Right
the
division."
mm,
As a matter of fact, even when God was trying to create a new nation, the nation of Israel, one of the things that he had made sure that Moses was able to do was to
yeah,
have gone to school
yeah,
in in the palace where he
yeah,
was trained the best way possible because God needed a writer.
yeah,
So when God wanted to dictate the laws of the land, who did he use? Moses.
yeah.
He did not need Moses to talk too much. He just wanted somebody who could write.
Right.
So
Who
he
could
was writing
understand?
stuff.
Mm,
We now understand that the first 5 books of the Bible were written by this same Moses.
yeah,
He complained that he couldn't talk much, but God did not need him to be a talker because God had a lot to say to him.
exactly.
So he was writing down. Now, what do you do with what you then write?
Mm,
This must become your obligation. You must begin to sometimes talk about it.
mm,
I say sometimes because you have to qualify where that is being spoken.
yeah,
It will sometimes get into trouble.
yeah.
It will bring you criticism.
Like he did
It
to
also bring you
Joseph.
encouragement.
Yeah,
But all of that is a package.
yeah.
It's the
It's
process
part of the
of
deal. It's part of the
exactly
deal.
because life will not just allow you to jump straight to your purpose. It will check whether you are truly committed to it.
Yeah. It will test your dream.
Life will
Your
test you.
dream to test.
Yes, you will be tested on it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Part of that testing will be that there's no food to eat tonight. You
Yeah.
remember, you remember those times, Shagun, when we come back and there's
I,
literally no
I
food.
I remember very well. Those experiences can never be forgotten.
So the question is, when there's no food, are you going to say, no, 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 this is foolishness. I'm not doing this anymore. Or when you are criticized so much, are you going to say, oh, I better change my mind because this criticism is too much?
Yeah.
No. Those are the natural testing to refine you, to
Yeah.
check your commitment.
Mm, mm,
And these things are very important. And they will also instigate the kind of discipline that your life needs.
mm,
Because suddenly you know, in order to do these various things,
mm,
I cannot do X, Y, Z.
mm.
I cannot make certain. Okay, one time as I was entering into Ogun State University that time, and we were starting to make friends. Now, this bunch of friends in my faculty, they said, let's go to the faculty of law to go and see some girls. There's one road that leads into Ogun State University, into the main campus, into
Yeah.
the mini campus.
Yeah.
Right down the road, I said, "Is that what you're going to be doing to your life?" Okay, our friendship has ended. I terminated the friendship on that road right there. Honestly, because something else was motivating me. I
Yeah.
did not come to this school to play,
Yeah.
and what your agenda is not my agenda. So honestly, I do not remember if we talked after that time. I terminated the friendship, and it was within my right to
Yeah,
terminate.
exactly.
I terminated the friendship,
Yeah.
and I decided to go with some other people. Some of whom are still my friends till now. Those people, I do not know where they are right now. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have changed and evolved, but at that point in time, it was an obligation for me to protect what I was saying. These are just a few things, and I know you have a lot more to add.
Yeah, I know you've already said a lot. I would just like to use this biblical reference from Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18, where the Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Now, anytime we see disorderliness, dysfunctionality, chaos, troubles, agony, pain, suffering in the society, is a clear evidence that vision is absent. That there is no way about it. There is nothing else you want to deliberate about. It's just a clear indication that vision is missing in that society. And so, for every leader, if the very first thing you must do as a leader, it is not when you get into that leadership position, that's when you start looking for what to do. No, you are already coming with a purpose in mind, with something to change within that space you have been called to lead. So for me, vision is like your northern star, the Polaris, that gives you a clear direction of where to go. Of course, the northern stars shows direction. It shows you it is from there you are able, once you are able to locate the North Star, from wherever you are, you can be able to find your direction. And that is what vision does to every one of us. It gives us the ability to be able to chart direction.
A thought came to mind, Shego, and I know that we're probably further into the time. You
Yeah,
know, there's a thought I think I want to suggest that you see everybody is vying to lead us.
yeah,
Everybody is trying to make us followers. So, for example, somebody will say, "Follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on Facebook." Right? They're trying to lead you.
yeah,
I think the most important question is to ask those people, "Where are you leading me to?"
exactly.
In other words, what do you see
Yeah,
you are taking me to?
yeah,
And that should be a way to qualify whether followership of anyone
yeah.
is the right thing or not. Because if where you're going is not where I want to end up,
Mm,
I reserve the right to say, no, I do not want to follow you. You are not qualified to lead me.
exactly.
In other words, vision, see, and I think everybody sees something. The
Yeah,
question is, do they see the right thing?
exactly.
So, what are you seeing? So, if a politician comes to me now and says, I want to campaign, and sometimes they come to our house, they drop a leaflet
Yeah.
saying one of this, I'm going to take one of them to task and say, what is your plan for my grandchildren?
Mm.
Because if your plan, I'm not going to ask about me because you're going to tell me we're going to build you new roads, right? I don't want that. What do you see for our grandchildren? That way, I'll be able to assess whether you have myopia
Yeah.
or some kind of sight vision.
Mm.
I'm talking about uh, not physical myopia. I mean, you are short-sighted. You
Short
can't see.
sightedness. Yeah.
Now the problem is this, and I like what the Bible says. Jesus said, "Beware of them.
Mm.
They are blind guides or they are blind leaders. And if the blind leads the
Right.
blind,
They all fall into the ditch.
what do they do?"
Mm.
So what that tells you is that the problem is not so much with the leader that is blind.
Mm.
It also indicates that those who are following must be blind to see that their leader is blind. If somebody listens to the ditch, you
Mm.
also have a sight issue.
Yes.
This is why personal leadership is important so that because no
Yeah.
one is an island.
Yourself. Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
you know how to lead yourself, but at the same time, we also work together in a corporate sense of
Yeah.
some sort.
Yeah.
And if you are leading me,
Mm.
or if I'm leading some people, my son, I must see a vision
Mm.
that is worthy of following, of pursuit.
Mm. Now, I think we need to move to the next question. Now, can a leader be motivated by a controversial or a damaging purpose?
Shagun, I mean, this question, I think we have too many examples to say absolutely fat yes.
Yeah.
Don't we see a lot of controversial, questionable
Mm.
motivations?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on Africa, but even beyond Africa, look
Yeah,
everywhere.
well, my own example is not going to be from Africa, so that it won't just be all that we are seeing about Africa is just doom, 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 doom. No.
No, no. But everywhere you look, you see examples, numerous examples of controversial, questionable visions or commitments where somebody wants to make or and remake society in some other image that we will not recognize. And so I will surmise it to say yes, indeed, it's absolutely, and we have more of such examples than noble visionary leadership. There are far many examples of those ones than the ones that you say these are credible and genuine and noble intent. There are a lot of people who are only after gain, personal empowerment,
Self-aggrandizement,
self-aggrandizement, personal economic
benefit.
improvement.
Mm.
Some people even want to, as it were, possess your life. I see this a lot in religious circles when somebody wants to derive significance by your own sense of inferiority.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter where you look in every sphere, in the business world,
Mm.
I operate in quite a lot, academic world, religious, even in government, there are so many of these things where ultimately the agenda does not make our lives better, and we are better off being left alone by those kind of leaders. But the problem is life does not allow vacuum. If the wise refuse to lead, they'll be led by fools.
Exactly.
Somebody must occupy
Space.
positions of leadership. Someone is vying to take you somewhere. In fact, you see, there is no sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
All of us, we are being dragged along
Mm.
or being taken along or being driven along somehow,
Or willingly, we buy
willingly
whatever
or
means.
willingly, by some agenda somewhere.
Yeah, I saw agendas.
So you can't even say, "Oh, I'm fine." No, no, I don't. No, you are affected. In fact, your children are affected. Your children, you say, "Okay, stay in this room," but in their room, somebody is trying to lead them to something.
Yeah.
Is it via the internet? Is it via various ideologies?
Yeah.
Somebody is trying to even lead your unborn children, unborn grandchildren,
Yeah.
because the word they create for them is the one that they have to contend with.
Mm.
So there are so many controversial things.
Mm.
This is why everyone must take the question of or the subject of leadership very seriously. We can't say those are our leaders. No. And Shagun, this is why we talk about personal leadership. It is crucial. It is not an option. It, you can say, well, as long as our leaders do it, as
Mm.
long as no,
Mm.
I'm talking about all of everyone listening to us right now. You are obligated
Mm.
to lead.
To be the example.
Be the example. You are to invest in your leadership development. You simply have no choice. You don't have the luxury because if you don't, you lose the right to complain about the outcomes.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah. The example I will readily point to about a leader having a controversial or a damaging purpose, of course, is a man everybody knew about in history, and that is Adolf Hitler. Now, this was a man that didn't come into power via coup. He didn't kill anybody to come into power. He came into power through normal democratic process. He became the leader. And just like we've been learning about leadership, whether you are aware of it or not, some people have an agenda, whether you are willing or you are not willing, they have an agenda to drag you somewhere. So this man came up with a philosophy. And what was that philosophy? He came up with a philosophy of the purity of his own race, which he calls the Aryan race. Of course, he never told anybody the exact definition of what he meant by the Aryan race, because people could not really even describe the race he was really even talking about, because there is no such thing in existence. Because in one way or the other, we all have our genes in each other. So there is nothing like this is a race that is entirely 100% pure, that has never interbred with another race. So people do not even understand what it meant by the purity of race. But this man had this philosophy of the purity of his own race, and of course of the German race. And he thought to himself that the only obstacle to achieving that good race that he had in mind were the Jewish people. And the only way to achieve that was for him to eliminate the entire Jewish race, which of course he wanted to do. He almost succeeded. But of course, at the end of the day, he failed. But in the process, he ended up killing over 6 million Jews in the process of achieving that goal that he could not himself even define on paper, that this is what I am pursuing. And that tells each and every one of us that it is not everything that some leaders runs after that is truly noble, or that is truly important, or that is really to the benefit of the society.
Do you
So
know,
we
Shegun, that
have
he
it
actually
in
wrote,
yeah.
so forgive me, he wrote a manifesto. I will let you continue in a second. He wrote a manifesto, he called it My Kampf.
Mm.
Now, and this is why sometimes book, they tend to take credibility once they are written.
Yeah,
So the fact that somebody has written a book does not mean the content of the book is right,
yeah,
because the idea in that book
yeah,
led a lot of people to commit untold atrocities. Please, I didn't mean to interject. Please carry on.
yeah. What I was saying was that for the fact that somebody as a leader is pursuing an agenda doesn't mean that the agenda is always 100% uh, a noble cause that everybody should believe in. And I told my wife something very recently. I said, can you imagine that I'm almost close to 50 years, that it took me nearly 50 years to understand that every man in this life has an agenda. I just came to that realization just recently. In fact, just last month. That was when I came to that realization that there is no single man on this planet Earth that does not have an agenda. And once you have that at the back of your mind, it will help you to balance your relationship with people.
100%. That,
I
that
said,
is,
for me, it took me almost 50 years to know, but I thank God I was able to come to that realization.
let me tell you what when I knew. It was because, as
Yeah,
I operate in a lot of consultancy space. So I remember one of my project managers said to me, you know, some years ago,
yeah,
He said, Kunle, what's your agenda for this meeting? He said, always remember this. Everybody has an agenda.
Wow.
So this was, I think it was 2010 that that
Mm,
person said that to me.
mm,
Now, you see, let me tell you the counter implication of this.
yeah,
You don't have that, and you are not aware that other people have it. You will always be naive.
exactly. You
You will
always
think
right.
everybody has the best intent, right? You will think because you don't mean harm, therefore,
Mm,
maybe nobody else, everybody's just like me.
mm,
Nothing could be farther than from the truth.
mm.
And you see, this is why thank God for you know the this kind of platform,
Yeah,
particularly as we're working with people who are coming after us.
yeah,
It is good for them to understand that
yeah.
somebody is trying to take you somewhere. You must understand that.
Exactly, exactly.
No matter how pretentious they are
Potentials they may be, yeah, or diplomatic they may,
or diplomatic, and the fact is this, Shegun, if I wanted to steal your wallet,
yeah,
what's my best chance of stealing it? By making sure you don't know,
yeah,
as you're not aware.
yeah,
So most people disguise their real aim, their
yeah,
real agenda,
yeah,
by hiding it under a noble front.
yeah.
It's like having a cake, a cake that's already rotten, but I put nice icing sugar
Yeah,
on it.
I see sugar on it, yeah. Mm. Now, we are going to have a follow-up question on that. We just spoke about an agenda now. Now, I want to ask, how can a leader build adaptability and resilience when you suddenly discover that there is sudden change in the pre-planned agenda?
This is a brilliant question, Shegun. And I'll make this statement upfront that plans can change,
Yeah, it can. It
but
will. It
but
will. Not that
and,
it can. It
and
will.
it will change,
It will change.
but purposes are permanent.
That they are permanent. Yeah.
A good example is this,
Mm,
and it will sound very simple.
yeah.
If you are taking your children to school
Mm,
on Monday
mm,
and somehow something had happened over the weekend
mm,
that meant that your usual route had to be closed.
mm.
In countries that value other people's usage of roads, what would they do? They will put detour, they will put a sign and say, road ahead closed. Now, what as a person that's taking your child to school, what are you going to say? Oh, road is closed. I'm going back home.
If you like yourself, you better follow the detour.
What you will do is you follow a
If you
detour.
like yourself, you better follow the detour.
You don't go back home, but
Yeah.
you follow the detour,
Yeah.
find an alternative
Yeah.
path.
Exactly.
And that's why I was saying that plans can indeed change and will
It
most
will
of the time
change. It will
change
change. Yeah.
because life will not, if even God will not allow us to just go straight to your purpose and say,
Yeah.
oh, I see that. I just go straight. Oh, it's so easy. Thank God. No,
Yeah.
no. In fact, life is a sequence of detours
Yeah.
when you're trying to steer back to the right road.
Exactly.
I learned that people who fly planes, pilots, that oftentimes what they do is, before all these pre-programmed planes,
Yeah.
you're constantly steering back to the
So the
flight
regular
path.
course. Yeah.
You're constantly steering back.
Yeah.
You're constantly steering back. Even when we drive, isn't that what we do? If you leave the steering, what happens?
It will go in
The
the
car
wrong
just
direction.
veers off. So you're constantly putting that car in its own lane. In the UK, and I know that also is in the US, I don't know some other countries. So you have demarcations on the road where, particularly dual carriage roads,
Mm,
we have like a dotted line that says this is your own lane, and the other person has his own lane. So people will say maintain your lane.
mm,
Oftentimes, if you don't take enough care, your vehicle will veer to the other lane,
mm,
and that really is the nature of our journey
mm,
into the fulfillment of the purpose and the vision that we see.
mm,
There will be changes.
mm.
Life will happen. Things will change.
Things will
It might
change.
be it might be resources. that will not be available when you need it to be.
It could be
It might be that a
services.
crucial team member is now going on maternity leave.
Yeah,
Somebody might be sick.
yeah.
There
That
may be a
will build
policy,
technology innovation that would
yes,
practically
technology,
change
political
around.
decisions,
Yeah,
um, environmental, economic,
yeah.
social,
Social,
various things will happen,
cultural, everything.
cultural. Even when you think everything is laid
It
and
might
clear,
even be your own worldview that is changing.
exactly,
It
exactly.
will even be your own worldview that is changing.
It's because nothing ever remains the same.
Yeah,
Everything is changing around us all the time, particularly in this 21st century. Is the pace is so great that
so rapid.
you cannot expect that everything just look.
You cannot afford to have 5 years plan now or 10
It
years
is.
plan.
Let me be honest with you, Sean.
You can't have that.
The way artificial intelligence is growing, right? It's growing
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Most things are going to change in the next 18 months.
I know. Yeah.
I mean,
My children, they just finished their AI lesson with a teacher. I I kind of arranged for them. Well, the teacher was teaching them how to use some of this AI stuff.
exactly.
I have
Now,
to pay the teacher for them to learn it because I could see the direction where
exactly,
the world is going.
exactly. So imagine, imagine somebody whose job was an efficient, fastest typist.
Yeah,
You are the fastest. You can type 200
yeah,
words a minute.
yeah.
Now, even when computer came first,
Yeah,
that job became redundant.
yeah.
But now, let's say you are a good programmer. What you need to do is to tell agentic AI to say, write me a program
And
to,
prompt it.
yeah. And and literally before you finish that statement,
Yeah.
it's already been written. So how would you then account for your 5 years computer science degree? It becomes a question
Yeah,
how to contend with. So my point is this: things are changing so quickly that,
I agree with you.
and that's why we must become adaptable.
Yeah, adaptable.
But we must be able to read the times.
Yeah,
Honestly, one of the best skills now, in my view,
yeah.
is ability to understand,
Adapt,
is adaptability.
adaptability. You know, we also have a course on adaptive leadership in our curriculum at School of Transformational Leadership,
Mm.
where we teach people how to step back and look at what is happening, and then where you are discovering that things are not really working right, then you adjust your course and then you move on with your journey.
Exactly. And sometimes it's also new people are introduced to
Exactly,
a project or to an endeavor,
exactly,
and,
exactly,
and you need to learn to work with them.
exactly.
So what do? You must be flexible, you must be adaptable,
Yeah,
you must
flexibility.
people skills.
Yeah.
You must be able to read, hear what is not yet said.
And don't also forget that you are working against the chaos that we were talking about at the beginning. You are working because chaos will always want to maintain its own status quo.
Chaos is like flood. So from the outset,
Yeah,
it's really challenging because you are swimming against the tide. When
exactly,
when, when flood
exactly.
is when you see flood,
Yeah,
is dragging everything towards destruction.
yeah,
There is no flood that leaves a place designed and
yeah,
beautiful after it's finished.
yeah,
Flood, anywhere you see it, only leads to destruction.
yeah,
Only leave destruction in its wake.
yeah,
So when you are swimming against the flood, the tide, then you know the gravity of the matter.
yeah,
This is why, this question is very important, that
yeah.
let no one, in fact, the way John Maxwell says, he said, leadership is an uphill task.
Mm.
Do not think that it's just hunky dory.
Not,
No,
it's not a smooth ride. It's up,
it is
it's up.
literally
Yeah,
It's literally sometimes dealing with a tsunami.
exactly. Walking against the tide.
And that's why adaptability,
Mm.
in fact, also an expectation that things are not going to remain the same.
Yeah,
That is key, so that you don't get disappointed or too dejected.
exactly.
Because
Exactly.
if you think, oh, then you say, oh, wow, we have a crisis.
Yeah,
Well, crisis is part of the game.
yeah.
And it's how
Know
you,
that there is no stability anywhere.
no, no,
You have to
absolutely not.
continuously work against stability because
Absolutely.
there'll be imbalance all the time.
All of the time.
All
So
the time.
all of the time. And we are seeing it. I mean, we don't even, everywhere you look,
Yeah,
everything is changing
everything is imbalance.
in
Yeah.
any way you think about it.
And you have to survive in the midst of that imbalance.
And you must not be swept away by the tide.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank
So
you, my friend.
I would say, maybe just to round up,
Yeah.
I would say the worst thing to do when things are changing so rapidly is to do nothing.
Yeah.
I'm saying this to all of my friends, saying the worst option in crisis is to do nothing.
Mm, mm. You'll be swept away.
You will be swept away.
Mm. You have to make some effort in some sense.
And it's discovering what is the right, anticipating it,
Yeah.
and what can, and being that adaptive, and knowing, okay, how do we respond? How do we manage it? How do we, and this is why some people say there's something that's called risk management. There's what is called issue management. Both of these are very important. Risk management, one of the key things there is to know how do I even identify what is a potential I mean risk identification. And then you now think about, okay, risk prevention so that it does not become an issue. But that's a different matter, which we'll be picking on another time.
Yeah, I know for a leader, as a leader, thank God we are all leaders. We know that one fundamental uh, factor that is critical to leadership is trust.
Mm,
Uh, if you must be uh, an effective leader, you must be able to hand the trust of the people that you are leading. And if you don't have this trust, it's just a question of time before your leadership will collapse. Even for leaders who have controversial motives or ulterior motives, they need some trust in some way. People have to be able to have certain beliefs in them. Of course, the belief that they have may not be genuine, but there's some sense of reliability in that leader that is making them to follow the leader. So I just want to ask, how can a leader inspire trust from others in himself? How can you genuinely do this as a leader? How can
mm.
you inspire trust? Because this is the currency that drives leadership. How can you now do it as a leader?
Another big question. It feels like we're handling very, very heavy,
Yeah, it's really
heavy,
heavyweight
they're
questions.
all very
Yeah,
heavyweight questions.
yeah.
And each of them, honestly, we could spend the whole session talking about them. But suffice to say that, uh, I was writing a note on this particular one because that was when I felt like this really jumped out at me.
Mm,
I was asking myself, to build trust, there are so many elements to it.
mm,
Because number one, there's the angle of what we just said the other time. I know it's possible that somebody can have a controversial purpose,
yeah,
but as long as certain people believe that, okay, this makes sense to us, you can earn their respect.
yeah.
In other words, there has to be some credibility, some believability
Mm,
to that purpose and to that vision.
mm. Yeah,
Vision itself may not be a good one,
yeah,
but it must seem credible enough
yeah. To the people.
to gain the attention of people that will say, okay, I think let me listen.
Yeah,
So I would say the genuineness,
yeah.
the credibility of of that vision and purpose. The second one that comes to mind is the capacity to deliver.
mm,
Now, most of the organizations that we've come to respect now, one of the things we say about them is that these people have been able to build something.
mm,
And because they build it consistently, let me use a food example, Big Mac.
mm.
In your country, right? Wherever you go, Big Mac tastes exactly the same everywhere.
Yeah.
So you
I,
don't,
I took one in Canada when I was in Canada. Sometimes I say, wow, this is not different from what I have back here in
any country where there's Big Mac, they taste exactly the same. Okay, let me use Coca-Cola. The taste of Coca-Cola is the same everywhere.
yeah,
The capacity to build that kind of capacity to do that same thing
yeah.
time and again. That's why Coca-Cola sells as much as it does.
Mm,
Now you can say there's so much sugar in it, blah blah blah. But the people that like Coke,
mm,
and they will follow Coke. They will say always Coca-Cola, right? Because there's certain consistency to it.
yeah,
They've mastered the game.
yeah. I think that word is very beautiful. Consistency. That is the key. Consistency, the reliability.
Capacity,
Yeah,
consistency, credibility, which is what makes people to believe that what you're saying, I
it's
like,
believable. Yeah,
yes, believable.
the authenticity.
Yes. Then the capacity to sacrifice.
Mm,
You see, when look at this, when Jesus told disciples, I'm going to die, I'm going to the cross.
mm,
And Peter was saying, no, that shall not happen to you. Just said, no, don't stop it. Don't try to touch that. And they watched the person they love
mm,
following through and going to the cross.
mm,
When Jesus rose up and said, Peter, you too, you are going to stretch forth your hand.
mm.
He did not argue. He just said, okay, what about John too? Is he also going to have that same faith? Then I accept my own faith. But is that what's going to happen to John? He said, don't worry about John. I will look after John. You just follow me.
Mm,
In other words, there is this inspiration,
mm,
the ability to inspire the same value in
mm,
the followers because they see the example, the power of an example, and the power of the sacrifice to a cause.
mm.
If somebody comes to you, Sheikh, and say, "Give me $5,000. I'm doing a business," and the person has not shown you anything that he has
That's done in the
sacrificed,
past.
he has not put 1 cent into that endeavor, and he says, "Please give me $5,000 from your money."
I know it's not ready.
You say,
Already
yeah,
yet.
you say, yeah, well, yes, you know, if you don't want to be so rude, you say, you know what, let's give it some time. Go and do something with it and then let's talk in 3 months' time.
Yeah,
That's a way of saying, please, that's the door, leave.
yeah.
Because you cannot see the commitment of that person into what he says he believes. But when people see that what you are putting your money where your mouth is,
All this. Mm,
they say, this thing means something to this person.
yeah,
This
exactly.
person is serious.
Exactly.
Therefore, they can be inspired to
Mm,
also make sacrifice. Now, the problem is this: people who lead, they will say, you know what, you take a pay cut, but
mm,
they are getting bonuses.
yeah,
How can somebody who's taking bonuses credibly
mm,
demand that you take a pay cut?
exactly.
That's why people get angry. Somebody will say, sacrifice, the country is going to get better. But you see them, you
Yeah,
know,
like we have in Nigeria now, the leaders don't want to sacrifice, but they're asking the citizens to make
be
sacrifices.
patient, be patient, we are working at it. But you see them squandering all the resources. So you say, no, no, we are not buying this. This is a scam. And this is why leaders lack the moral authority to lead.
Mm.
Because there's no, you,
I think that will be our last question. We're still coming to that. We have two more questions to go, and I quickly want us to address those two questions. Then we call it a day. Now, now we know that the process of leadership is there is a process to it. There is a science to it. If you will allow me to use
Yes.
that word, there is a science. There is an approach to developing leaders. The leaders don't just appear. There is a process you go through to develop them. There is a process you go through to empower them. So how does empowering others, how does it take place? What are the things we need to put together, or what are the processes we need to put in place to empower others to become leaders like ourselves?
Hmm. We have heavyweight questions today. And it sounds like we need part two and part three. Let me tee it up. I'm going to tee it up. I know, and I'll let you come in.
Yeah.
Well, I read a quote that children learn more by example than by precept.
Yeah, by precepts.
And that's, say, I now was saying to you the other time that we have this platform where we invest in young people.
Yeah.
And part of that is show them
Mm.
what,
Don't tell them.
yeah,
Mm.
don't tell them, show them what it looks like. So, for example, when I was telling them that, you see, you need to create a vision, you have to have a purpose statement, a
Mm.
vision statement. You need to set your values,
Mm.
set your goals.
Mm.
I brought my own example of what I had done years and years ago,
Yeah.
so that you don't think I just went to read one book somewhere
Yeah.
and I'm talking about. And I told them, listen, what you see me standing in front of you
You
is exactly
done
what I
it
was thinking
several
when
years ago.
I
Yeah.
was thinking about it 16 years old. As a matter of fact, this will sound a little, I don't know if I should say it. When I was in primary school, primary five, I became a deputy teacher. My teacher, my classroom teacher, yielded the class to me and said, "Hmm, until I resign, I'm not working again." She made me literally do everything in that classroom. So, teaching, trying to educate minds, somehow had been put into my system
Mm.
from a very young age.
Mm.
The planning, like what's the parent curriculum? I was doing that with my teacher.
Mm.
I'm not quite sure what led her to do it, but I'm grateful she did because she was literally speaking to my future.
Mm.
What's my point? The power of example is key. And in that example, we must develop, and I'm glad for what you're doing, my friend. And we're doing our part on this side, but what you are doing, let me speak about you. What you are doing is creating what I call a, I know we use the word curriculum, but it's more of a system
Mm.
and structure. Real development happens where there is a system and a structure for development. If there is no system and there's no structure, you will not have development because everything will be sporadic, haphazard. You will just be going on impulse and nothing meaningful will come up. So I say that a system that includes a curriculum of intentional leadership cultivation. I use the word cultivation because it's almost like you are, when in back then when you do a Greek, you
Mm.
first plant your tomatoes on the bed. You do a bed. You put
Yeah.
them there. It's a nursery.
Yeah.
When they have grown maybe by this length,
Yeah.
then you transport them. You do a transplant
Yeah.
into where they will then continue their growth.
Yeah.
And you put a stake there. You are literally tending a baby.
Mm.
Or when you are somebody who is used to tending a vine, is you're tending, because leadership requires exactly that. So a system of the right curriculum, of mentoring, of coaching, of what I would call practice, i.e., so let me tell you one of the things we do. Because we're trying to inculcate in our young people the ability to also speak and share their ideas. What we do is we sometimes we take a theme and we break it down into subject, and we assign it to them to write, to actually build their own presentation slide and then present. And then we also put them together to brainstorm our own themselves and then share their feedback. What are we doing? Now, if a child from age 12 or 13 is used to doing that, what do you think? And you do that consistently every quarter. By the time they are 16, how confident do you think they will have become? I would say they will become, I mean, way, way better than somebody who never even touched it. So
Exactly.
instead of saying something to them, say, Segun, I think you agree with me. I'm going to say something. One of the weaknesses of what happens in church is that we have chosen the weakest form of intervention, which is called preaching.
Mm.
You say something to people, say something, say,
And
and before they
oversay
recover,
it.
and before they recover, you say it again.
Yeah,
So it's jumping on them.
yeah,
There is no, and it is the weakest form of intervention. That's why people can come to a place and they come so many, but
yeah,
there's no change that you can point to because you have chosen the weakest form
yeah,
of developmental intervention.
yeah. I agree with you completely.
You're dumping on them, dumping, 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 dumping.
Without even giving them the chance to implement what you have said.
There is hardly an opportunity for them to say, "Excuse me, I don't quite agree with what you said. Can you elaborate?" The preacher will curse you.
We don't even want that. We
Well,
don't even want that.
will likely curse you because you say, "You're challenging me? Who are you?" The ushers will probably arrest you.
And bundle you out of the church.
No wonder we have very weak parishioners
Yeah,
because
I
because
agree.
true learning happens when people ask questions. Look at Jesus. They will say most of Jesus' teaching came by the question
Yeah, from the
of
people.
disciples.
Yeah,
And the beauty of question is this: when I ask you a question, I'm now telling you what I really want to learn.
exactly.
Before you are the one volunteering and
That
imposing your
to
own
teach
idea on
what
me.
they are not even wanting to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when they say, Master, is it good for me to fight with my wife? Now he's telling you an area of interest that he needs input
Yeah,
in.
and also to, yeah.
But if you come here and be saying, you see, marriage is good, marriage is, what you're saying to me, honestly, is just flying over my head. I'm not interested.
It is not related to his lived reality.
Exactly. You are imposing your ideas on me. You don't care about what I have. So, and this goes into the real definition of education. The word education comes from the word to educe. It means to draw out. That's where you see that scripture, Proverbs 18. Counsel in the heart of a man is like a deep water, and a man of understanding will draw it out. So
Yeah,
to truly educate somebody is to draw out something from them in order to raise their level of awareness.
consciousness.
But if I just come and just drop something on you, I'm not educating you. Honestly, I'm not. I'm probably trying to impress you that I know something.
That would be more or less like indoctrination.
That's indoctrination. That is imposition of idea. Jesus hardly, in fact, he will just not say anything. Now, this is somebody that knows everything, but he will hardly say anything until somebody asks him a question. And this is just something I feel like we need to correct,
Yeah,
particularly in our circle that we belong to, which is in the circle of faith.
yeah,
We impose, we indoctrinate instead of really educating.
yeah,
Because education does not mean you are doing a telling.
yeah,
It means you are really allowing the
yeah,
audience
yeah,
to say what is in them because they may not agree with you, but they're just being polite because they don't want to be seen to be unruly. But if you true exchange can happen when I've been able to expose what's in my mind, then you know how to respond to that and say, well, I agree with you, but have you considered this other angle? That person now say, I didn't see it that way. Okay, now I know more than I knew, or I give up on my previous position. To me, this is part of this whole curriculum, and it's a wide thing when it comes to uh, 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 cultivating leadership. We can't exhaust it, but I've said a lot. I'll let you add a lot more to it, Shagun.
yeah. I will just add a little to it, and then we ask the final question, and then we wrap it. We wrap it up for today. I would just say that for us to be able to foster, to be able to empower uh, other people to become leaders, to become a kind of a leader that can influence and affect the society in a positive way. I think the first thing we need to do is uh, to foster uh, a condition whereby they are hopeful of the future. You know, that is very, very important. If you cannot see a better future ahead, uh, whatever you are doing in the present will be meaningless. It is the hope for what is to come uh, that is, in most cases, that inspires us to want to continue forging ahead. If there is nothing to look forward or to look forward to in the future, then whatever we are doing in the moment is just will be full of tiredness, will be full of boredom.
Activities without meaning.
Just be activities without meaning, uh, without anything that will be a kind of reward or benefit for us in the future. So fostering a future with hope is very, very important. And not only that, we also need to be able to come to a point whereby we have a shared values that we all uphold together, that we all believe that this is what binds us together, and this is what we are all committed to as a people, as a group of people, as a nation, uh, as a race or whatever community that we find ourselves. We must have that shared responsibility to our shared values. We must have a collective responsibility to our shared values, and we must be ready to make something good out of it. So, in other words, what I'm saying is that purposeful leadership or purpose-driven leadership must be able to galvanize our collective action in such a way that uh, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the messiness that we have all around us, we're able to create a condition where there is opportunity for everyone to grow. So, as we wrap up this conversation around what it means to lead with purpose, I would just like to ask this final question, and then we call it a day because we've spent a long than an unusual time. And so I want to ask, how should a leader develop a moral courage to lead?
Mm.
How should you develop a moral courage to lead?
Mm. I think to not overstate it, the moral force of the leader
Mm,
is the character of the leader. So
mm,
what you're really saying is, how does the leader build character?
mm. Your motive.
How do you
Mm,
how do you live with the strength
mm,
of conviction of
mm.
character,
Your
really?
conviction. Yeah. Mm,
And I want to say your character
mm,
or our character
mm,
is literally the reflection of the things we value.
mm. Exactly.
In fact, our values reveal our character. In
Mm,
fact, let me put it another way, our values reveal our leadership.
mm, 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 mm,
We do not need to wonder about a leader when he has shown us his character.
mm,
Now we know where it comes from or where she comes from. We know what the leader values.
mm. That he has. That he,
If you take all of the budget that belongs to all of us for development, you already told us
mm,
who you are.
mm,
You are a selfish leader.
mm.
You are a destructive individual.
Trustworthy leader.
you are not worthy of our trust. So in essence, every time I'm telling you who I am, because they say it, I'm going to translate it from Yoruba. They say character is like smoke.
If anyone.
You can't hide it.
Before you know it, it will reveal itself.
You cannot hide it.
Mm, mm,
We can't hide who we truly are, no matter how much we pretend, because eventually the mask will fall off.
follow. It will follow.
And and this is why I want us to connect it, because ultimately we're approaching these things, I believe, in some very pragmatic ways.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I was saying to my young friends, I call them our young leaders,
Mm,
that right now
mm,
you must begin to write down what you value.
mm, mm,
Write it. You have a personal value statement, and I encourage everybody here.
yeah.
You know, when you are away from this
Mm.
presentation, whether it is your phone or your pen or your other writing material, write down the
A
things you
book.
value.
Mm,
Just write the things I value.
mm,
I genuinely respect
mm,
people.
mm,
And what does that respect mean?
mm,
It means that I I recognize and and value their sense of individuality,
mm,
such that I do not need to impose myself on them at the expense of their welfare.
mm,
If we don't define these things,
mm,
it will always show
mm,
in our lives, and there will be the glaring expressions of our feelings. For example, if I say honesty is my best policy, you should never trust me,
mm.
because there are times when it may not be best for me to be honest.
Yeah. It should be the main policy.
It, Honesty should be my only policy.
Yeah, the only policy at all time. It
I
has
have
to
no
be
option.
constant, regardless of the situation.
Even if I have to go through a discomfort
Yeah,
or, or sacrifice or
yeah,
punishment, I will still be honest. If that is part of your fabric,
yeah,
if I now find myself in a position that will test that as a counselor, as the manager, as the governor, that thing is in the fabric of my being. It will speak out. I'm going to create enemies naturally, because some people say, no,
yeah,
uh, honesty is a convenience. If I say I value the trust that people put in me, if that is part of my value system, it will directly influence my choices. And this is why I was saying to my younger friends that write this down, because you cannot do this when you are older. It has to begin now as youngsters. You are 14, you are 15. It must be written down. I dare say that most people now in our positions of leadership that we don't quite appreciate their work, they never did this kind of things. Well, invariably, they also defined other values, because there is no vacuum in life. Some of them, they wrote down that violence is my watchword. They wrote it in their, they wrote it by not writing it.
yeah,
They implicitly chose it.
yeah,
It's a value. So when there's an opportunity to be violent, they don't see a problem with it at all.
exactly. Because it is a means to their hand.
They chose it consciously or unconsciously. And it is this accumulation of values that defines our character. Character is not a mystery.
Yeah, it is not.
It's just really the reflection of the things we really value. And what we value reveals our leadership. I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Please
Well,
add more to it, my friend.
just to wrap up everything we've all been saying, we've together been saying, I'll just say that for a leader to have the moral courage to lead, what it simply means is that as a leader, you must be ready to make tough decisions. Those decisions will not be popular. Those decisions will be and sometimes isolate you. Those decisions can leave you to become vulnerable, but it is still about making tough decisions that aligns with your values. They are intertwined. You cannot separate them. You cannot say one has to live without the other. Your decisions must be difficult decisions, but yet it must be decisions based on principles. What I see today is many professed leaders who are leading, who are making decisions, but decisions that does not align with their principle. But as for I, as a person, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the situation, I have made up my mind I will never make any decision or any choices that does not align with what I truly value. For me, it is principles, value that guides me, not what is in it for me, not what people are going to think about me. It is what does my principle or what does my value says in this regard. And if my value says go for it, I go for it. If my value says no, you can't go for this, no matter what other people are saying, I will never go for it. So that is what I believe drives leaders to lead with courage. That is what we meant by the what makes a leader to have the moral courage. It is your principle, your value that guarantees that moral courage to be able to lead others. So, Kule, I want to thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, my friend. This has been
Wonderful
a big,
podcast.
yeah, indeed, it is indeed a very, and a very valuable one at that.
Yeah,
Because
I really felt we really poured out our soul here.
yes,
And I believe it's really going to make the impact that we've always been desiring in our hearts. So I want to thank you for your time, for your friendship, for your love, for your counsel, for everything.
well, the feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for showing leadership, and it's always a pleasure for us to come together as we do. God bless, my friend.
All right. So until I see you again next month for another episode of our Leadership Blueprint podcast, I want to appreciate all our viewers for taking time out to listen to our podcast. More than just listening to us, if you really want this podcast to make the impact that we truly desire, we want you to help us to share, to help us to like, to help us to comment, and help us spread the news all across the world. There are people that need to hear this, and we are banking on you to be able to do this for us. So
Absolutely.
thank you. God
And
bless
why
you.
not, Shagun? If they also have questions, write those questions there, and maybe we
Yeah,
can treat those in future.
exactly. We can definitely do that. So until we meet you again next month, God bless you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
My regards to your family.
And to yours. God
Yeah.
bless.
Bye-bye.